Hello, gang. I am your host, Felipe Malicio, and you're listening to the Total Basis Podcast. We are here live from the Baseball Live Facebook group, Monday night baseball talk. And I brought a guest over as Austin is missing in action for the moment. We'll see if he chimes in after a while. But if not, we have Dan Butler out of Tennessee to talk to us about some Hall of Fame baseball. Dan, how you doing this evening?
Good evening. How are you tonight, sir?
I'm doing swell, man. I love, dude. This is one of my favorite times of the year. You know, it's hot stove baseball. And when I'm not doing, hot stove baseball, I'm crunching numbers for next year's fantasy baseball season. And when I'm not doing that around this time of year, I am knee deep in baseball statistics as I try to figure out where the baseball Hall of Fame could go right and wrong. And that is what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about the Baseball Hall of Fame, as we have two ballots, two committees to talk about. And I always butcher it because I always forget, but I guess it's the Early Baseball Era Committee and the Golden Days Era Committee. They both have 10 players on each ballot. And we're going to talk about each player. And Dan was with me, last year to talk some Hall of Fame baseball as well. So I figured, hey, let's try it again. You seem to be a very knowledgeable guy. And the most important part about you being here, Dan, is that you are enveloped in the whole Negro Leagues of yesteryear. Tell us about that a little bit.
Trying to, so just a little background. So we lived in Kansas City right after we got married. They had their initial foray into this was like a little one room, I don't know, 2,000 square foot. Here's a couple of jerseys, here's a couple of plaques kind of thing. A couple of years later, they bought the facility across the street and really made it into an actual museum. If nobody's ever been there, or folks have not been there, I should say, if you ever get through Kansas City, you got to go. One of the best things they've got there is, and I was actually trying to make it my background, they've got a small field set up. Yeah. And they've got, in essence, life-size statues of 9 or 10 guys in their positions, guys like Oscar Charleston and Satchel Paige and all those kind of guys. All the big names are at their positions that they played, which is probably the most popular part of that museum. And then of course they've got the jerseys and all the things that you would expect to see in a museum about baseball. The other thing I like about it, and just in general, and we'll probably talk about some of that with some of these guys, is it's not just baseball history. Yeah, it's American history. It's U.S. history. Without going way off the reservation here, but it's things that we need to know about the past of the game and about the country. I mean, there were things, you'll see some things that John McCraw said that I think he used as a cop out, but it's American history as well as baseball history.
That's something I think Bob Kendrick and all those Negro League players used to say all the time, that it's not just baseball history, but it's also American history, because if I remember correctly, listening to the Black Diamonds podcast with Bob Kendrick, he does mention that it's not just about baseball; it's American history. You can't tell the history of America without the Negro Leagues. Kansas City in general being the hotbed, it seems to be the epicenter of all that. And Bob Kendrick will tell us all the time, like, hey, while the Negro Leagues is as American as it can get. They're talking baseball, you're talking jazz music, you're talking food that is considered Americana, in the heartland of the country as well. So I definitely agree with you in that sentiment. I would love to go one day to Kansas City to visit. So maybe the next couple of years when the baby's all grown up and she doesn't cry as much.
Well, you say about Bob Kendrick, they were talking about Jackie Robinson on one of the first episodes of that podcast, and his sentiment was, and he's probably dead. Well, he's not probably, he is Jackie Robinson in 1947 was the start of the modern civil rights movement.
That's his argument. I mean, he would be a better expert than I am. I know that there were other precursors to all that, but you can he makes a wonderful case about Jackie Robinson really accelerating it. And
yes, I guess that would be the better term. He accelerated because he was a big name. It was a big name sport, very well seen, well known. So that's probably a better term, was accelerated it.
Yeah, because there were plenty. I mean, there were plenty of celebrities back then, that were giving voice to a population that was kind of voiceless, and not to get very well, it's a history podcast, right? I mean, we're talking history, the Hall of Fame.
Absolutely.
I mean, you talk about singers like Billie Holiday and Josephine Baker and geez, the other names escape me. Who's the other guy? Oh man, it's like Chad Calloway. No, is that a football player? I don't remember. The guy who goes Heidi, 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 hey,
Oh,
Heidi,
that's
Heidi,
Cab Calloway, yeah.
Cab Calloway. Okay, so I'm not going crazy.
No, you're right. You're right.
But I mean, yeah. I mean, it's like anytime you see someone that kind of entertains and humanizes, it's the same thing that happens nowadays with guys with artists like Michael Jackson, Prince, Denzel Washington, who we just talked about in the pop culture life as well. It does kind of like, hey, you know what? It does kind of put a human aspect into it, to people who are marginalized. That's probably what Jackie Robinson did back in 1947, 48, 49, when he was just getting his start. And it made people kind of question their values a little bit, I think, especially during that time. And let's face it, even with Jackie Robinson, you and I know he faced a lot of scrutiny just for being Black. And
well,
it's
and I think, I mean, interrupt, but I think one thing that probably made him, I guess for lack of a better term, I'll say hated, but maybe folks disliked him a little bit more, is because he did not back down.
Yeah.
He kind of took the fight to them, so to speak, right? He did not back down when he was, being mocked or tried to be humiliated or whatever. And I know the movie probably wasn't 100% accurate, but it was, there were a lot of, I think a lot of us who understand baseball can say it might not have happened exactly like that, but it probably was pretty close.
Yeah, I mean, Bob Kendrick will say that, they picked Jackie Robinson because he was Mr. All-America. He was married. He seemed to have the more docile character than anybody who may have been more talented. At least that's how the legend goes. And because of that, his numbers retired. Every April 15th, we celebrate Jackie Robinson across all baseball, and it's fantastic. And the other thing that people forget about Jackie is, as much of as a freedom fighter, not the freedom fighter, sorry, the civil rights person that he was a Republican as well. So that's the other god thing about it. So, I mean, it's not a bad thing, but usually the connotation is, well, it's the Democrats who push for civil rights, but here's a civil rights person, and he's pushing for Richard Nixon, if memory serves me correctly, or even Dwight Eisenhower or Gerald Ford. Although I don't know if he was alive for Gerald Ford, but anyway, but it's like it was more complicated, is what I'm trying to say, than what the mythology has led you to believe. I mean, yeah, he definitely did not back down. He definitely was a civil rights leader, but there was other things that he was disillusioned by liberals and the Democratic Party, and that's where the switch happened. And not to get political, but I mean, it is what it is. That's when you read a story, when you read the whole story about Jackie Robinson. That is one of the things that they mentioned. I was like, yeah, he ended up being a conservative Republican, and people are, what? How is that possible? Well,
right.
America's a complicated country, isn't it?
Well, it is, and it's like, we're going to talk about some stats for some of these guys, and do they hold up now or do they not hold up now? It was a different time. So values were different at the time, just like, is WAR and OPS, are those stats, we hold people to those stats back then because that wasn't necessarily what they focused on. Right. They didn't really care about stats. They played. I think the same thing goes for what you're talking about is, times were different. People thought differently. Parties thought differently. Has it flipped? I don't know. I don't really want to get into all that, of course, but I mean, I find that interesting. I actually, that was one of the more fascinating things that I learned about that guy, is that he ended up being a card-carrying member of the right, which you never would have thought.
That's exactly what I'm saying. So, I mean, Jackie was definitely one of a kind character, and like I said, his legacy will live on forever as long as, well, first of all, he doesn't get canceled. He can't get canceled anymore, right? Because God rest his soul. But for the rest of time, no one can wear the number 42. And every April 15th is not just tax day here in America, damn it. It's also Jackie Robinson Day. His wife is still revered as someone that is with high respect in not just the baseball world, but also in I guess in American culture as well. So that's where it stems from. And we're talking about Jackie because he opened up the floodgates.
He did.
You could almost, he did. And now we're here. Now there's 7 Negro Leagues baseball players who are in the ballot from the early baseball era, and only 3 major league players, I guess you could say. So let's get started. Let's get up and running. Let's see, what do we have? I want to go in a certain order so I'm not losing.
Well, real quickly, if I could, I kind of wanted to pull and see what the mission statement was for the Hall of Fame, because I think a lot of people look at the Hall of Fame and they say, oh, Bryce Harper is yes, Barry Bonds is yes, because they look at the numbers, and that's what we're using. I say we, baseball in general, is using to put guys in the Hall of Fame. But I looked at their mission statement on their webpage, and I'll just read a couple little snippets, but it's talked about being dedicated to fostering an appreciation of the historical development of baseball and its impact on our culture. That's Jackie Robinson. That's the Negro Leagues. Another part talks about honoring those who have made outstanding contributions to our national pastime. That can mean a lot of things, right? Branch Rickey's one of them. And then finally, in the second paragraph, it talks about their mission is to preserve the sport's history, honor excellence within the game, and make a connection between the generations of people who enjoy baseball. Making a connection between generations, that's kind of what all this is. So it's not always about numbers. That's why when we look at some of these Negro League guys, is don't necessarily get caught up in the numbers, because you're going to look at the numbers and say, that guy's not a Hall of Famer. But then you talk about some of the things they've done in the game. There are so many firsts that came out of the Negro Leagues that you've got to take a look at that. So I just want to throw that in there.
No, that's definitely something I'm glad you brought up, because when people think about the Hall of Fame, the first thing they think, well, as one of my friends, Robert Holiday, who also has done these podcasts with me, his idea of the Hall of Fame is that you are walking among the gods, as he would say all the time. Yeah. And at this point, we're thinking about Robert. He's going through a really tough time in his life. So friend of the show, good friend of mine as well. But yeah, that's his ideal. Like, if it were up to him, and my buddy Matt Bushnell too, who does the football podcast, they would only bring in the top of the top, the cream of the crop, right? Which would leave a bunch of other people who didn't get those numbers out of the picture. But it says right there, honoring those who have made outstanding contributions to our national pastime. It's the Hall of Fame, the Hall of Famous. It didn't say anything about you need to randomly get 3,000 strikeouts and 300 wins and 500 home runs in order to be considered.
Correct.
It's right there, dedicated to fostering an appreciation of the historical development of baseball and its impact on our culture. You just mentioned it's not just about baseball history. It's American history, American culture. It's Americana. So without that being said, we mentioned that because a lot of these guys who are nominated are going to have to be considered mightily because of their not off the field, but just their contributions in general to baseball. Right. I have it set up at the Baseball Reference website. I guess it's listed by war. So are you okay? We just go line by line, war by.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll find it and I can talk real quick about him.
All right. First up to the plate is Bill Dolan. This is a guy that I mentioned, my buddy Robert. We did an episode where we talked about the first, I guess, from 1896 to 1906. We talked about that 10-year period of baseball, and Bill Dolan was way up the list. No matter which advanced statistic I use, whether it be offensive runs above average, defensive runs above average, base running metrics, or just WAR in general, he was way up there. And then I find out he's not in the Hall of Fame. And how is this guy not in the Hall of Fame? Yeah. Why is he so disrespected after all these years?
You know, and I would venture a guess. I mean, I think a lot of folks in this group are pretty knowledgeable on baseball. I would guess a lot of folks have probably never heard the name Bill Dolan before this ballot came out. Now, that's the reason, because he was back in, 1890 to the 1910s.
Right.
But you talk about advanced metrics, looking at his information, for shortstops all time, he's 9th in WAR. Mm-hmm. 9th. Think of all the shortstops that have ever played baseball to major leagues. He is 9th of all time.
Now, is that Baseball Reference or Fangraphs? You got to be specific.
Baseball Reference. I use Baseball Reference, so I'm sure there's probably an asterisk by it right now, right? Because it's not Fangraphs, but I got to believe Fangraphs is probably pretty close to that.
I didn't check, but it sounds right. I know when like I said, when he did it, not only was he one of the best shortstops of all time according to WAR, he was among the best players of that time, of his era.
And isn't that kind of how a lot of us thought of the Hall of Fame, right? Is you have to be the best, I guess, at your position when you played.
Yeah, well, this guy transcended his position in terms of production. Yeah. I mean, he was it. I mean, and again, it's position, era, but it's only era and position when when I don't know, I feel like there's like a lot of double speak, a lot of double standards when it comes to these players'
Sure.
eligibility. But Bill Dolan, I mean, you listed it here. I mean, yeah, he didn't
Isn't
get
that
the
the fun thing
sexy.
about
Go
isn't that
ahead.
the fun thing about baseball though is double standards, you double talk, you talk out of both sides of your mouth a lot in baseball. I mean, that's the fun of it. There's a lot of yeah buts when you talk about it.
Yeah. Well,
You know,
go ahead.
you know, and again, this baseball reference war we're talking, but it's better than Jeter, Larkin, Trammell, Reese. That would be Pee Wee, not Pokey. Ernie Banks, Lou Boudreau, and Louis Aparicio. All those guys. I mean, he's better than all those guys when it comes to B-War. So that alone, and of the top 10 all time, top 10 shortstops, he and A-Rod are the only two guys not in the Hall of Fame. A-Rod's a conversation for a different day. But so to your point earlier, I mean, real simple, how is this guy not in? I mean,
Yeah, well,
it seems brainless.
it looks like this would be his best chance. Everything about from Baseball Reference favors him to get in this year, so we'll see. And quickly we move on. We got 20 players to go through. You have anything else to add about Bill Dolan before we move on? So I hope you don't mind doing it rapid fire. Like I said,
no, we will. I got a couple bullet points for everybody. So we'll
awesome. That's why I have you on board, man. Left field duel. There's a guy we just talked about off the field contributions. There's a guy who will need a lot of consideration for off the field contributions because he made his mark in Japan, didn't he?
He did. You know, and I actually don't have information on him. I think I neglected to put him on here, but he did do a lot. That's one thing I found out about him is he did a lot in Japan, and again, not MLB, but did he contribute to baseball overall? Yeah, he did. There's a lot of things he did. I got to pull him up because I did not. I guess I missed him.
Yeah, I thought maybe that you were working on him still. I saw 9 players, like, oh, I'm sure he'll send an update or he'll talk about it. But here it is from the Baseball Hall of Fame website. Played for 11 seasons in the majors, won 2 National League batting titles, has a career batting average of 349. So a lot of traditionalists will point to that and say, oh, well, 349 career batting average, he must be in the Hall of Fame then. Right. He managed in the Pacific Coast League and was credited with more than 2,000 victories. But again, that's minor leagues. But his real contribution, 1932, O'Doul and other players traveled to Japan, where they instructed college students on the intricacies of the game. He returned to Japan several more times throughout the decade, and then multiple times after World War II, becoming a beloved figure in the history of Japanese baseball. Dan, I mean, you can almost say, I mean, we talk about Jackie Robinson opening up the floodgates for a lot of these Negro League baseball players who are up for induction this year. You can almost say that without Lefty O'Doul, there is no influx of Japanese players. I mean, it happened a little later, but
but that falls under that.
Yeah, right.
For the good of the game, sort of clause, right? He helped expand the game to a completely different continent. So it's other races. So he's right there. I didn't vote for him.
We'll get to that in just a minute here, but yeah, I was this close to voting for him, but then I mean, it's really hard to. Well, we'll talk about it, our ballots when we get to it. But yeah, sure. Lefty O'Doul, his big contribution to Japanese baseball, and as you know, that eventually would bring in guys like Hideo Nomo, Ichiro Suzuki, and now Shohei Ohtani. This is the guy who brought that baseball fever to Japan, to the whole to the country of Japan. All right, who's next on the docket here? Allie Reynolds, my guy, Allie Reynolds.
Allie Reynolds.
Well, really quick, I just want to point out that I talked about this with you too in the private chat while we were getting ready for the show. Allie Reynolds was a prominent figure in Peter Golenbach's book about the 1950s Yankees called Dynasty. And Allie Reynolds, who was nicknamed Super Chief, although I could have sworn that he was just simply known as Chief. Yeah. But I don't know. I looked it up, and Baseball Reference says it was Super Chief. It's like, all right, whatever, it's fine. I mean, he is half Native American from Oklahoma, and he was one of the all reliable starting pitchers for that dominant Yankee squad for almost. I think he won 6 championships with them, I believe, if I remember correctly. Yeah. What do you got for Allie Reynolds on your end?
So he won 6 titles with the Yankees. Was an all-star 6 times, and 2 of his seasons he was top 10 MVP. And for a pitcher, that's saying something. You know, he didn't play a lot. I mean, he played 13 years, so half the years he won a championship, half the years he was an all-star. I mean, those are pretty. As I started looking at his numbers again, I thought nothing jumps out, but I'm looking at it through the scope of, hey, he walks too many guys, he doesn't strike anybody out. Well, but that's the thinking for 2021. The thinking
Well,
for back then was not the same. So
yeah. And I think before the show, we were talking about how, I mean, first of all, strikeouts, I mean, until Herb Score and Whitey Ford came on,
right,
there weren't a lot of
nope,
pitchers striking a lot of guys. But because they played in these cavernous ballparks, all they really had to do was just put the ball up above the strike zone and just induce fly balls. And, you got Mickey Mantle behind you, and he's going to get to every single ball in Death Valley up in center field. And that's all she wrote. And that's how him and a lot of those Yankee pitchers like Vic Raschi, that's how they survived. Just, they didn't have to throw with high velocities or have their best stuff. All they had to do was just lay it up there and trust their defense to get them out of and trust their ballparks as well to get them out of jams. And
even if they didn't make the out, they're going to give up a long single or a double. That was it. It wasn't a homer.
Yeah, it wasn't an automatic run. And,
Yeah.
and a lot of those guys, and the Yankees were stacked in the outfield. They always made sure to get the guys with the strong arms and the great range. And yeah, I could talk about. I mean, that's one of my favorite books of all time. Even though you could say I'm a Yankee hater, but I think I honestly some of you guys know, I root for both the Cubs and the White Sox. But because of that book and books just like that, I almost became a Yankee fan just because of. I mean, you couldn't go to the school library and not pick out a Yankee book because they were the most prominent team out there.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. Again, we talk about baseball history, American history. You can't talk about baseball history, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on where you sit, without talking about the Yankees. Because, I mean, late 40s into the mid 60s,
yep,
it was the Yankees. I mean, they were baseball. Let's be honest. They were.
Yep. And Allie Reynolds was a major,
big part of it. Big part of it.
Big part of it. The downside to Reynolds is the counting stats aren't there. The rate stats aren't there. It's a lot of what do you call it? A lot of anecdotal evidence to get him in there. But we just talked about how different of a time it was back in those days, and he did play during a war-torn country as well. So, but yeah, that's that. When I saw Allie Reynolds, I got excited because it brought me back to my childhood, as that was one of those prominent names I used to read out a lot about. Next on the dock is George Scales. He has a nickname, doesn't he?
Yeah, Tubby. It's quite flattering. Again, we talk about stats that have played 20 years, but they've only recorded or they've only found, 2,500 basically plate appearances for the guy in 20 years. Not to say they're not out there, because again, a lot of us that follow the game know that if they found 2,500 in different historical references and articles and things like that, there's probably another 2,500 sitting out there somewhere that did not get recorded because they may have been barnstorming through North Dakota and nobody kept score. They barnstormed through Oklahoma and nobody kept score. But I think his forte came through managing. He managed the Black Yankees in 1932, 148 and 27. That's pretty good. You win 85% of your games. That's pretty solid. He also managed a lot in Puerto Rico. He won some titles down there as well. He was manager of the year down in Puerto Rico 4 different times in the 40s.
Oh, wow.
So, he's one of these guys who, he was 319, 421, and 509 on a slash line, which is pretty good. That would get playing time now. But I think where his memory comes in, if you will be what he did as a manager. Again, overall, he won 64% of games he managed. He managed a record of anyway about 1,200 games. He managed 1,200 games to win 64%. That's a strong number. And
his nickname was Tubby. And we talked about how different eras, different times, you gotta account for those eras. This guy's nickname is Tubby. He's 5'11", 195 pounds. I think most of us would kill to have that kind of
physique. If I could get to 195, I'd take it right now.
Yeah, same. And that way my doctor can leave me alone about my weight.
Yeah, call me, and then you can call me whatever you want at 195. If you want to call me Tubby, go right ahead.
Born in Talladega, Alabama, the racing hub down there. So but that's going to be a theme though. There's numbers missing. They don't have all the data. They don't have all the stats. It's somewhere out there if they could just dig a little deper and find it. So it's just unfortunate, but that's also. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I look at a website again. I'll even post it in the group. A website that has it's not the Negro League Museum, but it's a site that has extensive, like 30, 40 pages research on a lot of these guys that we're talking about and just some other players. You talk about getting into the minutia.
What's the website called?
This is let me look on this other one. It is.
But just to finish my thought really quick, I think that's part of the intrigue about these players is that it's mysterious, but in a good way. Not like I don't know who these guys are. Who cares? But it right. Makes you. I know when I was doing the research, I'm like I wanted to dig a little deeper as to who these guys were because these are names I never heard of before. But all of a sudden, they're considered to be Hall of Famers this year because of the way they decided to split the eras for the Hall of Fame. So it does add a little bit of intrigue, a little bit of curiosity, if you will, to see who these guys were. Not just as players, but as people as well. And did you find that website over there?
I did. Yeah, it is C as in cat, N as in Nancy, L as in Larry, B as in boy, R.org, CNLBR.org. It is extensive research on this stuff. And it's just, that's why I got a lot of this information. It's just, it would take you 2 months to read all of it. I'm talking, like I said, I'm talking 30, 40 pages for each one of these guys.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
It is. It really is.
Let's move on to Vic Harris. I feel like he also had a weird nickname, or am I thinking about someone else there?
There's a couple others that have some nicknames. Actually, one other one that has a nickname, but no, you're thinking of someone else.
Okay.
This is a guy again. 600 games in 18 years. They've got a record of him playing in 600 games. His numbers, nothing flashy. 305, 372, 427. Again. In today's era, that'd be great, but his calling card was as a manager. He was probably one of the best, if not the best manager in the Negro Leagues at the time, in the 30s and 40s. He managed for 11 years. He was a manager for 8 All-Star games. He won 2 titles, 2 World Series, won 7 pennants.
Wow.
This guy, he managed the Homestead Grays.
Hmm.
Those of us again that know about that stuff, the Homestead Grays were the New York Yankees of the Negro. They were in it. You listen to some of those Bob Kendrick podcasts talk about the Homestead Grays and the Pittsburgh Crawfords, the little battle that Greenlee and
I was just listening to that.
They had. It's you think and you're like, that's exactly what happens right now. It was really not a lot different then than it is now. So his calling card again, he was, those 11 years by far the best manager. He won 66% of his games, 7 pennants, a couple World Series. That's a pretty good run for 11 years. Again, playing nothing spectacular that would jump out at you, but probably the best manager in the Negro Leagues history.
Yeah, I was listening to all that. That sounded like, Kendrick just started naming guys like, hey, I know that guy. I know that guy. Hey, I actually know that guy. It's like it's a who's who of Negro League baseball history. On the same team. It's crazy. Like you mentioned, the New York Yankees of the Negro League. So quickly about Vic Harris. So we talked about Tubby. What's his name? Was it George Scales?
Yeah, Tubby Scales.
Tubby Scales, sorry. Being a 5'11", 195 pounder. So that's why he was nicknamed Tubby, and we both agree. Oh man, I would gladly take 195 pounds at this moment. Vic Harris is 5'10" and 168 pounds, so just an inch smaller than Tubby Scales, but obviously about 30 pounds or so lighter than Tubby Scales. So therefore, that's he was
just portly. They just called him portly. He wasn't fully Tubby.
Vic Harris, another guy from Alabama, Calhoun, Alabama, also with his brother Bill Harris as well. A sibling calling card there. Dick Redding is the next guy on the list.
What Cannonball?
The
Cannonball. So this guy again, not a lot of records. We're talking early 20s and 30s. He was a barnstormer, but a lot of newspaper accounts, which is what that particular website that I gave you, they do extensive research. They look at, they've got all the newspaper articles and different stories at the time. But the newspaper accounts back then credited him with pitching 7 no-hitters against all levels of competition. That was in 1912. And they also have him at 30 no-hitters in his career. Now, again, we got context is he wasn't playing against Lou Gehrig, Babe Ruth, Ted Williams, DiMaggio. He was pitching against Cletus on the North Dakota barnstorming team, right? So he wasn't necessarily playing against even very good players, but the fact is he still dominated everywhere he pitched.
Mm-hmm.
Everywhere he was allowed to pitch, he dominated. In fact, so this is one time when John McGraw piped up. They asked him which black players he would like to have on his team, and the Cannonball here was one of them, along with Smokey Joe Williams, Spotswood Poles, and Henry Pop Lloyd are the four guys that he would take on his team.
The nicknames are just off the chain right now. This is awesome. Oh man.
And we talked about the Homestead Grays. We talked about the Pittsburgh Crawfords in that rivalry. Mm-hmm. So one of the big names out of that was Cumberland Posey. He was the owner, and when they asked him who were your top two pitchers, one of them was Smokey Joe Williams. The other one was the Cannonball, Mr. Redding. So to me, that's the kind of stuff that holds a lot of weight. That guy was the Negro Leagues too. He was immersed in it, obviously, as an owner. If that guy's telling me that Cannonball Redding was one of the best pitchers of the era, then I'm taking him at his word.
Wow. I mean, that's high praise. That's real high praise. Really quick, just wanted to say hello to Henry, Calum, Chris, Matthew, and Steve for tuning in and talking some Hall of Fame. I hope you guys are staying cozy in this dreadful Chicago weather. Although, I don't know, Calum's from London, I believe. Henry's from New York. So we're all over the place here at the Baseball Life Facebook group. Really quick, something that really bothers me, though, is they asked John McGraw if he could have any black baseball player, who would it be? And he clearly knows about these guys. He clearly knows that the existence of these great baseball players. And yet it would not be for another, 30, 40 years for the color barrier to be broken.
We got one of these other players coming up. Has some other things that John McGraw said about him that I think will, to me, sheds a little bit more light on, what he says and what his intentions are behind what he says.
All right. Well, is it John Donaldson?
It is not John Donaldson. Wait, hold on. It is John Donaldson, actually.
Oh, all right. Life group serendipity.
This is the guy who, you and I were talking. I was thinking of maybe changing a vote, but I didn't. So again, there is a website that I didn't look at because it's full of information. But I got it again off that website I've already given, just how much research has gone into all these guys. This guy here, they found 667 games that he was known to have pitched in through stories, box scores, and whatnot. Over 5,000 strikeouts confirmed, over 400 verified wins, 14 no-hitters, and 2 perfect games. One of the reasons people don't know about him, and it's hard to find the stats, is the guy played in 725 different cities.
Jesus Christ.
The U.S. and Canada. This guy's last name is Norton, who studied this stuff. He looked at more than 7,800 newspaper accounts. So it's as thorough as you're going to get. 725 cities in the U.S. and Canada. And it was all pretty much, if you go to North Texas, all the way up to Canada, it was all in that middle part of the world, which we know a lot of the barnstorming took place.
Yeah.
So this goes, again, with John McGraw, Hall of Fame manager, right? He said, I think the greatest I've ever seen, and I would give $50,000 for him. And here is the key word, your key phrase, if it weren't for the color line in baseball. So in my opinion, knowing how things were back then, it was real easy for him to say, I'll give that guy $100,000 to play for me. But hey, I can't, there's that. He can't come play for us because he's not a white guy.
Oh my God.
I think he said that knowing that there was no way he was going to be able to come play for him.
Yeah.
So it was a real easy thing to say, sure, I'd pay for him. But another interesting thing that actually lends some credence to maybe he was truthful was he actually offered this guy, John Donaldson, $10,000 to go to Cuba, change his name, and come back to the United States disguised as basically a dark-skinned Cuban.
Yeah, because they're not black.
Yeah. Apparently that was okay. But he refused to take the money. So, I mean, that actually gives me a little bit more credence to what he thought of the guy if he was going to pay him to go down and change his name.
Yeah, change his name, I'm surprised he didn't tell him to bleach his skin a little bit while he's at it.
Well, then Sammy Sosa, but that's a different story.
Well, no, he's just pink now at this point. He's Pepto Sosa.
You know, I think there's something to be said for that too. Is he refused it, and a lot of people would say 10,000 back then. It's a lot of money. Why wouldn't you take it? But there's a guy that wanted to make it on his own with who he was and how he was, as opposed to, I guess, not being himself and coming back as someone else, changing your name just so that I'm accepted by white baseball in general. Which, to your point, how is a dark-skinned Cuban at that time any different? Because there were a lot of Cubans in the Negro Leagues.
Yeah, exactly. And
so I found those two quotes pretty fascinating to talk about how good this guy was.
Yep.
Because like I said, first I thought that was just an easy thing to say because he knows he can't jump. But when he offered him a way to make the jump, he still refused it. So maybe he had a little something behind what he was saying, his opinion.
It's just insane to me. Just sounds absolutely insane. Speaking of which, oh no, sorry, I was thinking about somebody else here. Oh no, yeah, he did. Bill. Speaking of which, Bill Dolan. I believe he was a teammate and even a player under John McGraw, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
So it's all connected.
So one last thing on John Donaldson is the owner of the Kansas City Monarchs, Gail Wilkinson. He said he was one of the greatest pitchers to ever live, white or black. And again, that guy would know. I mean, he was immersed in baseball. So again, when a guy like that tells you he's one of the greatest of all time, there's some credence there.
It's just insane. I mean, 100 years later, or more than 100 years later, now it's like fans demand that these Major League Baseball teams get off their ass and go all over the world and find us the best baseball players to play in Major League Baseball, regardless of religion, race, ethnicity, whatever. At this point, sexual orientation. And Dan, you're kind of a history buff. I would take it.
I pay attention. I try to pay attention.
Well, to me, it's just the weirdest thing. I mean, the North won the Civil War, right? And somehow Jim Crow laws, which were running rampant in the South, take over not just the country, but this game of baseball that's supposed to unite everybody and just be universal. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter your skin color. It's can you help the team win? It's a team sport.
It is, and oh my God! Imagine if that was happening now.
Yeah.
The thought process is, and it wasn't this way. Maybe it was back then, but that would. I mean, think about how that generates even more revenue. But maybe they looked at us to say, well, wait a second. I agree. We need to bring everybody in, but if I do, I'm going to lose all these folks who don't want that. So maybe that was their counter. I don't know, but I'm with you. I don't really give anything. I don't care who you are. If you help my team win, you're a good player. Come on over. There's a lot of people that don't like that. It's America's game. Well,
for some Americans,
the world's really small now. The internet has made the world very, very, very small.
Internet, globalization, all of that. I mean, shoot, McDonald's is everywhere now.
I want the absolute best players playing. I don't care where they're from.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad we're at this point now, but Jesus Christ, I know it's a different era. I know it's a different time, and yet I still read this stuff. I would have that player, but he's black, so you know how that goes. John McGraw, Hall of Fame manager, saying this. I mean, he could get away with stuff like that because he was one of the more winning managers at that time.
Right.
But the fact that even the winning manager says, well, I got to play by the rules, knowing damn well that winning solves everything. But I digress. Let's go next man up. This is probably the most popular of the Negro League players that are listed here. It's almost perplexing as to how he's not in the Hall of Fame, but it's Buck O'Neil, 5'10", 190 pounder. So not quite tubby. What's that?
He's a slam dunk in. He should be. First of all, he was the driving force behind the Negro Leagues Museum in Kansas City. Obviously, this guy, before he passed away, we lived in Kansas City for a bit. This guy was it. I mean, he was the most popular guy at Royals games. He was the most popular guy in town, period. You'll hear, he's one of these guys. There were a lot of guys in the Negro Leagues who listen to that podcast who never met a stranger, and he was one of them. He never, ever met a stranger. He'd always ask you how you were doing. He would listen to you. I got to meet him one time. He would never remember. I just happened to shake his hand. But he's just one of these guys has a smile on his face all the time. And knowing what a lot of these guys went through back then, the fact that they are able to sit here and smile and talk about the good times is absolutely, it's mind-boggling to me. The strength that these guys had. But back to Buck O'Neil. I mean, first African American coach in major leagues for our Chicago Cubs.
That's right.
Now, there's a couple. We talked about as a scout, he was responsible for bringing Ernie Banks, Billy Williams, Lou Brock, and George Altman to the Cubs, which is obviously three of those names are. Well, two of those names are legends. One could have been a legend, but he was a legend elsewhere to the boring town. And here's another interesting thing that I found, which kind of baffles me. In 2008, they actually honored his legacy with the Buck O'Neil Lifetime Achievement Award. So the Hall of Fame that he is not in is giving out an award with his name on it.
Oh my Lord. Yeah.
So they've recognized, and I get that the Hall of Fame itself is different than the voters, but they're giving an award with the guy's name, and he's not even in the Hall of Fame. This guy is the no-brainer of all no-brainers. He is the biggest, go on YouTube and look at his interview with Letterman when he was on the Letterman show. I mean, the guy is so full of knowledge, was full of knowledge. You talk about ambassadors for the game, and he's kind of the guy that made me want to look up what the mission statement was when we talk about historical development and its impact on our culture and those who have made outstanding contributions. That is Buck O'Neil 100%. This guy's in the Hall of Fame. Yeah.
So it's just the hypocrisy of the Hall of Fame to have a guy like that name an award after him, but not put him in the actual Hall of Fame. And this has to be the year. I mean, it seems like he's gaining momentum. Like you said, he's a slam dunk for, if anything, just for his off the field contributions. You mentioned all those players that he was able to sign as a Cubs scout. He also brought in Lee Smith, Joe Carter, who was the hero of the 1993. Was it 93 or 92? 92 World Series or 93? Damn it. No, 93. Sorry. Mitch Williams.
93 when you hit the homer, yeah.
Yeah, off Mitch Williams. Oscar Gamble as well. As said on the Black Diamonds podcast with Bob Kendrick, he listed all those players along with the guys you just mentioned. So that alone, I mean, I know scouts don't get a lot of play, a lot of Hall of Fame talk, but there's something to be said about just hitting on every single Hall of Famer that you can get. I'm pretty sure he had the inside track on these guys, though.
Sure.
But use it to his advantage, though.
He was the first African American coach at MLB. That's what a lot of this. There are a lot of first in the Negro Leagues. He was the first. That's gotta stand for something. It's not that he was the first and then faded away. He was the first, and he stuck around baseball for a long time. And I think that word ambassador is overused a lot. It's overused a lot.
Not for this guy.
Not for this guy. This guy truly was an ambassador for the game, and he was an ambassador for the Negro Leagues. I don't understand. I'm with you. I don't understand how this guy's met. It's been 13 years since they named an award after him. 13 years, and they're like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I think we can consider getting him in there now."
It's absurd. And if anything, he's the reason there is a Negro Leagues Hall of Fame.
Yep.
So
absolutely, and there's a reason there's a huge interest in it now because well, it was baseball with Ken Burns. They did a spot in there, and he started getting a lot of interview requests because there wasn't a lot of guys left at the time, so he was getting a lot of interview requests. And he's on Letterman, he's on all the talk shows, daytime, nighttime, and he's getting the message out there. That along with the Negro Leagues Hall of Fame or museum rather, I think that's the contribution he made to this game. Is he does not want the past to die. Right. We can't forget it because it was a huge part of history. I mean, I would again tell people go to the Negro League Museum if you've never been there. Yeah. If you ever get there, you'll be there all day. It's not a huge facility, but you will be there all day. So I agree with you. I think he's a slam dunk. I can only imagine. Like I said, I want to go one day, hopefully soon, especially after talking to you. Quick hellos to Leon and Jacob of the Step Back Podcast, the basketball podcast over at Basketball Life, and or as I like to call them, 2 easy wins in the Basketball Life fantasy basketball league that we're in. Yeah, I said it. Oh, gun smoke. Henry wants to chime in and say that innovation does deserve recognition, and that's something we're gonna have to deal with it because the stats aren't there, but I mean, all the anecdotal evidence shows that these guys that we were just talking about made those contributions, and easy, and the domino effect that created across all of baseball. Sean, Alabama boy, excited that we mentioned Talladega.
Yeah, he knew that the Sammy Soda reference was gonna come in. He spelled it soda. I don't know if he meant Sosa. I don't know. But anyway, next guy up, Bud Fowler. This is an interesting one. 5'7", 155-pounder. And he's a local boy out of Cooperstown, New York. Huh?
Yeah. Well, he's only local because his dad. He's got a fascinating story. First of all, no stats on this guy. None. Zero.
Nothing.
Let me rephrase that. Almost none. There's really, you can't look at the stats for this guy. But his really fascinating story, his dad escaped slavery in 1859 and moved up to New York, to Cooperstown. And that's where he learned to play baseball. And again, we talk about Buck O'Neill with an award. They've got a plaque honoring, they've got Bud Fowler Day in Cooperstown, Hall of Fame city. The street leading up to Doubleday Field is Bud Fowler Way, or it's called Fowler Way. So again, he's got a street named after him on the complex. He's got a plaque in Doubleday Stadium on the complex, but he's not in the Hall of Fame. His claim to fame, earliest known African-American player in professional Major League Baseball, started playing at 14 years old in 1872. And again, I don't think the age matters or where. It's just he was the first guy. And again, like I'm keep saying, it's the first. A lot of firsts, and I think when you're the first, that's got to hold some water.
Yeah.
Because without him, is there any of these other guys? Is there a Negro Leagues, and is there any integration in 1947? Who knows? Who knows? So he was kind of the guy that started it all. But again, no real stats on this guy. One thing interesting about this guy is he did not play with just one minor league team. He was, 2021, you see a guy who's the best in the league, and you can argue whoever that might be. Let's just say it's Soto. Everybody wants him on their team. The Nats do not want to give him up. The exact opposite for this guy, back when he was playing, is he was so good. He was better than a lot of the white players. It pissed him off. So he had to go to another team. Imagine that. The guy is so good and your ego can't handle it. You'd rather lose your best player than continue to win.
Oh, boy.
That goes my mind. So this guy played all over the place in 1878 to 1895. So what is that? That's 17 years. He played with 12 different professional teams.
Yeah, that's amazing. That is really amazing. But
you get pushed out. You kind of get squeezed out because you're too good.
And then 100 years later, you get all these recognitions in your hometown, except for the one that counts the most, and that is
right. And again, he's got a street named after him. He's got a plaque at the baseball stadium on the Hall of Fame complex. So go figure.
It's really absurd, the hypocrisies and the double standards and just the comical way that the Baseball Hall of Fame kind of presents itself on a year-to-year basis. But you guys got to remember, it's just a museum. It's out there to make money. If it doesn't make any money, it doesn't know how to operate without it. That's why the Hall of Fame is one of the most important days of the year for the museum, because that's where they make all their money. Last guy on the list here, Grant Homerun Johnson. Okay, so when we talking about a guy from that olden days, Homerun Johnson, let me guess, he hit like 18 home runs and led the league or something, right?
Yeah, well, a slugging percentage, he maxed out at like 460 one year, but there's 4 or 5 different resources that show him his slugging percentage as a career between 350 and 395. So I mean, that's Mick Kelleher stuff. But again, that's dead ball era back there with Homerun Baker. So, the guy's hitting 90s leading the league. You're putting that guy fourth in your lineup. But again, a lot of missing stats on this guy. And a lot of them are from when he was in his 20s, which is probably, if we look at history, was probably when he was playing his best baseball in his 20s. Mm-hmm. So there's really not a lot of stats. You look, there's 4 or 5 different resources out there that have him recorded anywhere between 250 and 366 games. Not a lot to go with there. I'll be honest with you, I'm not real sure why he is on the list. I didn't find anything super noteworthy about this guy. He was, during his career, he was part of 26 championship teams which helps. What kind of championships were they? Not real sure.
Wow.
So again, in 39% of his games that they found of newspaper articles and box scores and things like that, 39% of them were games he played in Cuba. And Cuba comes up. So it's at the time he was the guy. So when you look at, you compare him to Homerun Baker, you compare him to those guys in the dead ball area. Yeah, he had some power. It's really about it. He was considered, I mean, by all accounts, he was considered one of the best black baseball players during that dead ball era, for whatever that's worth.
That's why he's nominated. That's why he's
Yep.
made the committee, the ballot for that early baseball era committee, because he was considered one of the greatest players of that dead ball era. But I mean, we're supposed to judge these guys based on the era that they played in. We can't,
Right.
Penalize him too harshly. But at the same
Right.
time, we don't even know where all of his games are, and
And
Baseball
that's the
Reference
thing,
has
it's
no
incomplete.
stats. Yeah,
He's received
exactly.
incomplete on his report card.
And there you have it. 10 players. Hey, you guys have an opinion? Let us know which 4 players maximum of those 10 players we just listed would you vote for if you had the power, that kind of power, to induct these guys into the Hall of Fame. Let's talk about it some more in the comment section. All right, now we get to the golden days era. That's gonna be probably a more popular era of baseball. And I actually have a spreadsheet for that I can share with everybody, because I know how much everybody loves my spreadsheet. So here we go. Let's see here. I made it all nice and colorful. Let me know if you could see it. It's thinking, and there it goes. Somehow Gaylord Perry's number 1 on the list from 1945 to 1985. A nice 40-year sample size, minimum 2,500 innings pitched. And there's the 2 guys in yellow, Jim Kite and Billy Pierce. Jim Kite, number 13 overall in terms of WAR, Fangraphs WAR, from 45 to 85. And then there's Billy Pierce at 26. So hey, they're in that first pitch of that Fangraphs leaderboard, all right? But as you can see, I have a color coordinator where red is good, blue is bad. I know Austin left us some information about these guys, so let's give him. Like I said, Austin could not make it due to off the field issue. Oh, look at him. Off the field issue. Let's see what he has here. When Kite was considered for a major league contract, he was offered a $4,000 signing bonus by the Senators and a $25,000 bonus by the White Sox. His dad told him to take the Senators deal so he didn't become a bonus baby and be forced to play on a major league roster before he was ready. What the hell is this? Yeah, nowadays it seems like these players want to be fast tracked to the big leagues already, and they sign the big bonuses, and they refuse to sign for anything less than what they think is rightfully theirs, and blah blah blah. But the big what do you call it? The big claim to fame for this guy: 16 Gold Glove awards consecutive. Now, Dan, like I mentioned, you seem to know your thing about history of baseball. What do you think? Were they really won by merit, or was it at some point just a popularity contest?
We've all watched a lot of baseball. I watched a lot of baseball. You can tell the pitchers who can't field their position. John Lester, guys like that, who can't field their position. But otherwise, I mean, you either make the play or you don't. And a lot of the times, the pitchers, if they make an error, it's a tough play, and it's tough to give them an error, right? I think it's reputation. I think a lot of it was reputation. With him, I mean, 16 is a lot, and I don't know if, my personal opinion, I don't know if a Gold Glove for a pitcher really means a lot.
Yeah, John Lester.
I guess you could say he doesn't hurt himself, but beyond that, I don't know if it's. But then again, I'm sitting in my house doing a podcast. I'm not in Major League Baseball, so what do I know?
Well, you're a passionate fan, Dan Butler. You're a passionate fan.
I am.
Yeah, it wouldn't be doing the podcast if you didn't give 2 shits about the sport, right? So here we are, because we don't know any other way to do this. Let's see. Known for his consistency above average pitching and fast work on the mound. But most of the season where he was below or league average were times when he was injured. So a little bit of an injury bug. But the guy played for a long time. I think he got up to 20 seasons.
And that's what it is. That's a guy that played till he was 45. I think he's got some counting stats that are. I mean, he's got 280 some odd wins. He pitched for 26 years, 25 years.
Oh, oops. There it is. Wins.
266. I mean, he pitched for a long time.
I mean, he pitched until 1983, man. My favorite year of all time. 83.
It was the start of my senior year of high school.
Oh, my Lord.
Yeah.
I was born in a hospital in Texas at that time. Yeah. While you were trying to go through prom and graduation in high school, I was just getting into this world, man. Ain't that crazy? Now we're in the Baseball Life Facebook
Here
group.
we are.
Here we are.
I think just he gets a lot of love for the Hall of Fame every year, and he should be in. He shouldn't be in. I just see a guy who was good for 26 years, or however long he was playing, 25 years. Was he great? I don't know if he was great.
Well, he has the counting stats. I mean, that's basically the argument that people make about Jimmy Moore. I mean, there is no argument for Jimmy Moore, but you can make an argument for Jimmy Moore just based on the fact that he played for forever, padded those counting stats. But if you look at the great stats, 3.41 ERA, it looks low, but compared to everybody else on this list who got to 2,500 innings, that's not a very impressive. 92 ERA minus, which, if anything below 100 is above average according to Fangraphs. But 92 is pretty darn close to that 100 threshold. A 1.25 WHIP, that no matter what era you're in, that's not impressing anybody. 339 FIP, 90 FIP minus, again, anything below 100 is above average, but still you're only 10% better than the rest of your league mates. But here it is, 70.3 WAR, wins above replacement according to Fangraphs. And that is a counting stat, that is a pass stat, that is a durability stat. And that is why Kite continues to get consideration for induction into the Hall of Fame. Anything else that what's his face left here? Tapped to battle Sandy Koufax 3 times in the 65 World Series. What was it? The Twins and the Dodgers 65 World Series. You don't remember? Okay. Well,
I was born in 1965.
Oh, so you wouldn't know. You were just
I was probably born right in the middle of that World Series, October 12th. So probably right in the middle of that World Series.
Oh man,
I don't remember anything.
I tell you, this guy's full of history, man. He's lived it. He's lived it. That's why I bring him over. He was briefly the pitching coach for the Phillies under Pete Rose, and left the job to pursue a broadcasting career. Which he got in trouble this year. Yep. Oops.
I guess one thing I would look at this, Felipe is obviously watch him pitch a lot. He's not like, and I'll bring up Clemens or Scherzer or Kershaw or some of these guys who are Hall of Famers or should be. I never thought when he was pitching, you're like, here we go. Good luck. You never thought that. You knew you were going to be in the game. You knew you had a shot to win. You knew he was probably going to win and not give up a ton of runs. But he didn't really dominate. He didn't, I guess, scare anybody. And that's kind of what I look at is, well, if he wasn't that dominating and really didn't scare other teams, one of the best ever.
Well, you know what it is. You know how I picture him. Like the more I, talk about him and dig through his stats and all that, he was basically Kevin Tapani for the 1998 Chicago Cubs.
Yeah,
that's how I imagine it. But Tapani, I think he was with the Twins when they won the World Series, right? In 90, 91?
Yeah, he was okay.
In 87, I believe. Anyway, well, that's Jim Kite. Let's move on to Billy Pierce. Jim Kite currently a broadcaster, so when he's not putting his foot in his mouth, he's does a decent job.
As far as we know, he's still a broadcaster.
I believe he still is. Billy Pierce started playing organized baseball at age 15. I mean, we're just talking about, what was it, Bud Fowler?
Yep. He started at 14.
Okay. So he started, Pierce started at age 15 and then was signed to the Tigers at 18 years old. Let's see, played for the Tigers in 1945. So 1945, the Tigers and Cubs faced in the World Series. But as soon as the veterans came back from the war, he was sent back to the minors. So maybe he didn't play. Oh yeah, he did. He was only there for a real short cup of coffee there for the Tigers. After a back ailment set him back, he was traded to the Chicago White Sox in 1949. ERA was awful, but he always had a quick fastball. He did lack control when he started out with the White Sox. What else? Former teammate Paul Richards became the White Sox manager, adjusted his windup, convinced him to throw a slider. And after that, his career changed for the better, and his control and slider improved all the way up to 1952, 3 straight seasons of leading the league in complete games. So a real durable workhorse type of pitcher. But here's the controversy. In the 1959 World Series, Billy Pierce, I mean, at this point, according to Austin, he was one of the more important starting pitchers of the Chicago White Sox. Suddenly did not appear in any games in the World Series. And we found out was because Al Lopez, the manager at that time, did not believe he was fully healed from a hip injury. And then after that, it was all downhill from there. And eventually he would get traded to the Giants. I think he played in the World Series that the Giants appeared against the Yankees in the 60s. I think it was 63 or 62. And that was his career. So if you look at the numbers, Dan Butler, I mean, it's a lot of blue, more blue than Jim Kite. Better ERA though, little bit better rate stats, but not overwhelmingly better. And the big number here, 51.4 WAR. I mean, that's respectable. I'm sorry, 52.9 WAR. Respectable, but I don't know. What do you think about his stat line that you see here?
No, because you look at his average season, 14-11, 327. Nothing wrong with that. Even then or now, there's nothing wrong with that. But is that Hall of Fame? I mean, he had what, 2 20-win seasons. I'm not going to go with losses because not that wins and losses are the end all be all, but back then they were a little more important because guys were going 7.5, 8, 9 innings. So wins did mean something back then. Again, a guy was an all-star, 2, 4, 6, 7, 8 times. Top 10, top 5, or top 3 Cy Young one year. Top 10 MVP twice. I mean, he's got some things in there, but again, when you look at the numbers you've got here and just his overall career, nothing screams dominance. He didn't even have like a 3-year run where he was just the absolute best pitcher in the league without question. Where you can point to that and say, he had a run for 4 or 5 years where he was the guy. Nobody could hit it. He got everybody out, but he really didn't have that. He had a couple good years, but that's it.
Yeah, I mean, the
Really
counting
solid pitcher.
The counting stats don't show it. I mean, it only reached the 3,192 innings pitched during this time span. And so that's on the lower side of things compared to Jim Kite, who went over 4,000 innings. I mean, it's just a difference of 1,000 innings, but it matters big. And the rate stats are okay, but not overwhelming. Like, oh my God, you got to get this guy in the Hall of Fame. The only saving grace for him is the WAR, which is over 50. I mean, you get over 50, now people start considering you. More people start asking, hey, why isn't he in the Hall of Fame? But upon digging a little deeper, it seemed like he was more of a flash of a pan guy, which really sucks to say because he was a very integral part of that Chicago White Sox team. Let's move on to the hitters now. And this one, I am going to have a difficult time trying to fit all these numbers in, but there they are in all its glory. Let's see. You know what? I see Dick Allen, but let's start backwards, Dan, because I'm a masochist as well as Mexican. Top 100 players from the 1943 to 1983 season. So that's another 40-year, what do you call it? Sample size, minimum 5,500 plate appearances. And I had to drop it to 5,500 plate appearances because of Roger Maris. And minimum Fangraphs WAR of 34.9. Now, Dan Butler, you may or may not be an advanced statistic guru, but I believe even you know that a 34.9 Fangraphs WAR isn't going to cut the mustard now, is it?
Nope, it is not. It absolutely is not. And, I think Maury Wills, I did a little comparison to, because, again, the guy he wasn't a one-trick pony. The guy could hit. Didn't take a ton of walks, didn't strike out a lot, once a couple gold gloves. But let's be honest, he's known for the stolen bases.
There it is. Yep, right there.
And it's funny, because this is the first time I see this list, compare him to the guy right above him. Because if Maury Wills is getting in, the guy right above him is getting in because he was a better hitter, had a better on base, similar stolen bases. Again, if we're not talking the advanced stuff, we're talking just counting stuff. Yeah, now Lopes played a lot longer. I get it. But I mean, I don't think stolen bases alone is enough to get him in. And that's kind of what he is. He's stolen bases.
I believe I make this argument every single time I talk about the Hall of Fame. How come home runs are more important than stolen bases? When you see it nowadays, fans complaining about today's game. No one takes chances on the base paths. No one can steal bases. No one's allowed to steal bases. These managers are too conservative, and all they do is play for the home run ball. Well, the reason they've only played for the home run ball is because no one cares about stolen bases as it pertains to the Hall of Fame. I mean, Maury Wills is one of the better stolen base guys, not just from a counting stats perspective, but from an advanced analytics perspective with the weighted stolen base of 41.8. That's top tier on this list of 100 players. And it's still not good enough because the other thing you see is a sea of blue here. Low on base, low slugging, low ops, low WOBA, low WRC plus below 100. So for hitters, anything below 100 is below league average. So he's 9% worse than league average. And the WAR is not, the wins above replacement according to Fangraphs is not going to save him either. So the one saving grace is the stolen bases. Now it just depends who's voting. If those voters love stolen bases, then there's a good chance Maury Wills gets in. If they don't, better luck next year, I guess. What is that a safe assessment, or am I being too harsh here? What do you think?
No, I think you're dead on. I mean, I look at a current guy now. He's not nearly as good as Maury Wills, but guy that gets a lot of it is D. Gordon. Everybody wants him to be leading off. You want a 290 on base leading off. You have these steals 80 bases a year. Well, if he gets on 80 times, yeah, he will steal 80 bases. He's got to get there first. That's why I don't know that stolen bases is the end all be all. Yeah, home runs are, but without looking at the numbers, I'm guessing a lot of the guys who hit homers also have a lot of doubles, also have a lot of RBIs, also have a lot of runs. They've got a lot of other things as well.
Yeah, I mean, with great power comes great run production, is what Spider-Man used to teach me. Roger Maris now. Now, this is an intriguing guy, right? I mean, this is the home run season leader at one point for about, 30, 40 years before everybody started injecting themselves with stuff that they probably shouldn't have been injecting themselves with. Roger Maris, though, took advantage of an expansion a couple of years back in the 60s, a short porch in a short porch in right field, and was able to be a little bit more durable than Mickey Mantle, who was also primed to have that record broken and be the next in line to pass Babe Ruth in the single season home run record. Instead, it was Roger Maris. Guy, was he from North Dakota, right? Oh yeah, I forgot. I got Austin stuff here. So let's get to it. Do you have Austin's notes on your end as well, or no?
I do, yes.
You want to take over for me while I drink some water? Read up a little bit about Roger Maris for the kids out there.
Yeah, sure. So he had 14 homers when he was a rookie with the Indians, and he got traded to the A's midseason that year. He was an All-Star in 1959, and they immediately, like you see now, he was immediately traded over to the Yankees, and obviously that's when he kind of, like Felipe said, kind of took off. Following year, first year over there with the Yankees, he led the league in RBIs, slug, and extra base hits, second in homers. Missed 17 games, so which is really not that bad, but missed 17 games. He still led the league in a lot of those numbers. His salary rose to an enormous $200 a month, but he ended up signing a $300. I'm sorry, that's the wrong one. I'm reading the wrong one. He did in the 60 World Series. He got a gold. He hit a couple of homers in the 60 World Series. Obviously, a lot of scrutiny with that home run battle. A lot of scrutiny there, and he still managed to get through it. And not just for battling Babe Ruth, he was also battling his own teammate.
That's right.
So, he held up under all of that. The one thing that I can see, and Austin references here, 63 and 65, he had some injuries. And that's one thing I look at his numbers is he didn't have a lot of full seasons. And to me, I think that's kind of what is hurting him. Now, he did play in 7 World Series, which at that time was most. He died. He passed away in 67.
Wow.
So he was young.
Wow.
But when you look at his numbers, though, you see a guy who looks like he struggled to stay healthy.
No, he retired in 67, died of cancer in 85.
I'm sorry, I misread that. You're right.
Yeah.
I misread that.
I mean, but you mentioned it, riddled with injuries. There's a reason why I had to drop it to 5,500 plate appearances was because of Roger Maris. I had to account for his 5,800 at bat or plate appearances compared to a guy like Maury Wills, who's well over 8,000 at this point. So that's one disadvantage. So it shows up on the hits, only 1,300 hits. So that's
only
so far.
That whole career, he had 275 homers. So he played 12 years, hit 275 homers, and in one season he hit 25% of his homers in 1 year.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, man, he took advantage of an expansion.
Yeah, you can't. The guy did it. The guy did. He put the numbers up, but total body of work, I'd say no.
I mean, it's a lot of blue here. It's more blue than Maury Wills, and Maury Wills, well, 476 slugging percentage, but that's something to be bragging about. I mean, but yeah, and if it sounds like we're being dismissive or being too harsh, I mean, it's the Hall of Fame. I mean, we got Dan. I feel like I'm very lenient towards these guys. I want to give these guys the benefit of the doubt, but now you got nothing to show me here. At least Maury Wills, you can say, oh well, stolen bases. Okay, I mean, if stolen bases is such a valued commodity, then yeah, put him in the Hall of Fame.
I would agree.
But Roger Maris
is in there. Roger Ramirez is in there. You know, his home run chase, his home run record. He's in there. His bust isn't in there, but he's part of baseball history. So he is his achievement is in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
I think that's fair.
Yeah, that's a nice compromise for him and his family. I mean, not to be disrespectful, but I mean, it's a hard sell, man. There's really nothing to go off of that except for that 1 year where he broke the home run record for the single season. Tony Oliva is next, and this is a real tragedy here, as it seems like every time I was reading about the Austin's notes, it seemed like it was one mishap after another. Known as one of the best all-around Latin hitters in baseball history. Let me fix this for you. All right, now we start over. Won Rookie of the Year in 1964. Had weak knees though throughout his career. Even with the DH, he couldn't extend his career. He changed his name to Tony. His real name is Pedro, but he changed it to Tony. Something about some birth certificate issues. Defected from Cuba. We just talked about Cuba. So who was the player? Was it help me out? Who was the player we were talking about in the Negro Leagues who was told that he should go to Cuba and then come back as a Latino player?
Oh, that was John Donaldson.
Yeah, John Donaldson. Well, yeah. See, John Donaldson, had he known that Cuba would become a communist country, and then where the players had to defect, maybe he would have taken John McGraw on that offer. But now we don't know. Tried out for the Twins and went 7 for 10 in 5 inter-squad games, and but he was sent home because he was a very poor fielder. Had trouble getting into the team because of racial profiling. So even during the golden era, right? Even after this is post-integration, there's still a lot of racist overtones with Major League Baseball teams. As you may or may not know, Dan, I'm pretty sure you do know, but it's the more racist teams that were out there back in the day were the teams from the North that were. I mean, the Yankees. I mean, what they had Elston Howard, and that was their token black guy, and
Clark Griffith was terrible.
Yeah, Clark Griffin with the Washington Senators, and then he moved them to the Minnesota Twins. But yeah, he made sure that he was appealing to a certain demographic, if you will, or race. Yeah, if you want to be blunt about it, sure. The Cubs, the Chicago Cubs, also took forever. I mean, imagine being a Cubs fan. You're seeing the Brooklyn Dodgers just get into win every single pennant every year, and your team continues to struggle because you refuse to even scout back black players. So thank God for Buck O'Neil. Otherwise, we'd be really miserable as Cub fans.
There you go.
Yeah. So there's no curse. It's just bad management.
What I've always said.
Thank you. That's why I have you on the show, man. Eye to eye.
It's a poorly run organization for many, many years.
Yeah. But let's see. Is that it? Yeah, there was a lot of he mentioned that the racial overtones. Back then, teams were only allowed. They put a self-imposed limit on the number of dark-skinned players that each team would have. It was legendary scout Joe Cambria who saved Oliva's career, along with 3 other players. Say, hey, get this. You got to get this guy. If you want to win, you got to get Tony Oliva on your team. And he did. He did help the Twins win, not championships, but he made them a prominent team.
You know what's interesting in a bad way about what you just said is they had a limit on the number of dark-skinned players.
Yeah. So
what the hell does that? What does that mean?
Well, it means that you would. I
know what it means
over me. So
I know what it means, but I mean it's dark-skinned. Why don't you just say what you want to say? You know, don't use dark-skinned. Just say what it is. Say what you want to say, because we all know what it means.
Yeah, you think that brown people are inferior to your white complex, and not to bash you too hard. I know you're from the South, and you're also of that fair skin color, as people would say.
Well, I'm actually from up that part of the world. I grew up in Northwest Indiana, so
that's right. You went to Purdue.
I'm a Southerner by transfer.
Oh, but you know what? Indiana scares me. You know, that's one of the hotbeds of the Ku Klux Klan, Dan Butler. That's what I found out.
I had nothing to do with that.
Well, hey, it sounds like you were kind of shocked to hear that anyway. So maybe it's not as bad as people. No, I remember seeing this documentary, probably on the History Channel, and I grew up in Chicago, right? Imagine me being a Mexican kid finding out about the Ku Klux Klan being on the next state over. I'm like, oh, screw that. And to this day, I don't like I don't like driving through Indiana. So Maury Wills, 92nd on the list in terms of WAR. Roger Maris 88th, Oliva 73rd. But again, as you see, Dan, lots of blue hueish color. 304 batting average. That's something. 830 outs, which is higher than Roger Maris. But I don't know. Do you see any endearing qualities for Tony Oliva as we
Yep,
move on?
I do.
Okay.
I do. 5 times top 10 MVP.
Mm.
3 times out of those, he was top 5. Again, that's saying something. You talk about being the best when you played. 8-time All-Star, led the league in hitting 3 times, 3 batting titles, led the league in hits 5 times. I say yes on him, but he's most definitely a borderline guy.
Yeah.
Simply because of longevity and durability. He did not have a lot of either.
Yeah.
Had he done that, and I did the math, his average 162 game season was 185 hits, I believe. Multiply that by the 15 years he played, he's right at about 2,800, 2,900 hits. He's in automatically there.
Oh, for sure. And then
even if he gets 2,500 hits, he's in automatically. I mean, this guy, all he did was hit. He's just one of these guys. All he did was hit.
and
So he wasn't a great fielder.
and he helped the Twins make it to the World Series. I mean, they didn't win it, but he made them relevant for a little bit in the 60s. So, and I guess I should point out that, first basemen do get penalized by WAR because, hey, you're a first baseman. Anyone can play the position, right? And then Ron Washington will show up out of nowhere and say, it's a very difficult difficult position to play. Ask Gil Hodges. Is he next on the list? Yes! Gil Hodges is next on the list. It just kind of worked out that way. You want to read about 67th on the list of 100. Do you want to read about Gil Hodges over there?
Yeah, let me roll up. So obviously, I think a lot of people if who know the history of the game, he was a gentle giant. He was a true gentleman on the field, which we don't. I don't know if that matters, but it probably should a little bit. Princeton guy. He was born in Princeton. Played 4 sports in high school, which I think we see a lot. We probably see a lot of that with a lot of these guys, multi-sport guys. He was very reserved during the '69 season. He didn't think Cleon Jones was hustling enough. So instead of signaling for him to come in, he walked all the way out to left field to bring him back to the dugout and take him out of the game. That's when he was a manager. Billy Martin kind of did that once. They didn't walk out to get him, but he pulled Reggie out. So we've seen that before. One of the first managers to stick with a platoon system. So I'm sure he's probably getting some wrath from some folks now because there's a lot of folks that don't like that. 370 career homers, most by a left-handed hitter from 1960 to 1963. Again, that's something.
Yeah.
You talk about the best of your era at the time. He won 3 Gold Gloves at first base. The guy had a good career. He had a decent career. But like you said, you and I talked beforehand. My only argument to this is if Gil Hodges is in, compare his numbers to Anthony Rizzo.
Yeah.
I mean, they're the same. And Rizzo's are actually a little bit better. So, I mean, Rizzo's not a Hall of Famer in my mind.
Oh,
Cub
man.
Hall of Famer. He's a Cub Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a statue guy. He's a statue guy, but he's not a Hall of Famer. That's what I use as my measuring stick is he's the same exact hitter as Rizzo, just not quite as much power. So I don't think he gets in.
What was I gonna say? Am I reading this right? Was he only 47 years old when Gil Hodges died? No way. That doesn't sound right. I'm looking at the baseball reference page and it says that he died at age 47, but no, that doesn't look right. Oh my God. Wow, he died very young.
He was young.
I mean, that's what happens when you manage the Mets. They'll accelerate your lifespan. You tell him that he's a gentle giant. He's 6'1", 200 pounds. So yeah, it's a different era back then, right? Just a different time. Because I thought he was like a Matt Olson type of player, but maybe 6'1" was the 6'4" back then. I don't know. But looking at the numbers, the home runs are there a little bit borderline 370. But obviously, you think about first baseman, you think more home runs. Then again, this is a different era. This is a different era of baseball. So, and just to put it in perspective, how many home runs did he hit? 370 home runs in a 40-year time span. That puts him at 23rd overall there, Dan. 23rd overall in home runs for that 40-year time span. So maybe, and it's a list of 100 players too as well. So maybe there's something to be said about that, about his progress.
I think there's merit there, and I think that there's merit for discussion. But I just think ultimately, he's in the hall, as we talked about, he's in the hall of really good players, but I'm not sure if he belongs in the Hall of Fame because
Yeah.
you look at those players he's around. You know, take out Lou Brock, but I mean, you know, guys like Fergosi and Boog Powell and Foster and Roy White, Thurman Munson, those guys were all really good players, but they're not Hall of Famers.
Yeah, yeah. And again, I like to point out once again, first basemen do get penalized pretty severely sometimes with the WAR number, but still a lot of the other stuff, the WRC plus and the other figures, they just don't favor him too highly. But I don't know. Maybe when they finally induct every single player on the earth in the Hall of Fame, needs some players to induct. Maybe they'll eventually induct Gil Hodges because of that. I mean, he was a very prominent player for the Brooklyn Dodgers all those years, though.
But I mean, keep going up that list. I know we don't want to waste time, but I mean, all those guys above him were all really good players, just probably not Hall of Famers, except for Beta Pinson, but that's another argument for another day.
Well, we finally reached the 50 WAR mark. This is around the time, Dan. We see that 50 WAR mark. And now you start wondering, is this good enough? Is he good enough? Does the WAR match the eye test or whatever to get you into the Hall of Fame? And now we get to Minnie Minoso, another Cuban player. But before we get to his numbers, let's get to the anecdotes that Austin was nice enough to provide for us. If my laptop wants to cooperate just one time. Let's go. So Minnie Minoso. Do you happen to know what his real name was?
Orestes?
Oh yeah, of course. He's Cuban. They always have the weird names. He was a catcher as a teenager, and then his mom told him, he got hurt fielding the position, and his mom told him no. But kind of like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. You're moving with your auntie and uncle in Bel-Air. Mom says, yeah, you're not playing catcher anymore. You're playing some other position. So he was able to convince a local Havana manager of a baseball team to let him play, and he told me I could pitch, I can catch. Manny Minoso noticed that there was a third baseman who was struggling to play third base, and he goes very, very wryly. He goes, "I can also play third base if you need me to." So, who's a famous catcher who converted to become a third baseman? I feel like was it Russell Martin, one of those guys?
Yeah, later in his career, I know Wilson Contreras converted the other way from third base to catcher.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Oh, yeah. So there's some connection between the two positions. Let's see, what else did he have here? He can pitch. Okay. You talked about guys making $50,000 if they go from Cuba to America. Manny Minoso, $2 a game is what he was playing for back in Cuba, and $8 a week working in the garage to make ends meet. So yeah, different times back then.
My gosh.
You want to read the rest of that spiel there that Austin gave?
Yeah, sure. He obviously rose through the ranks, earned $150 a month contract with the Premier Winter League team in Havana. His salary rose to $200 a month, a whopping $200, as I said earlier. He ended up signing a $300 a month contract to play for the New York Cubans in the Negro Leagues. So he got a 50% raise before going to the Negro Leagues. He obviously did well in the Negro Leagues. He was signed to the Indians. No room for him in the major league lineup, so they traded him to the White Sox. Homer did his first at bat for the White Sox. Old Comiskey Park too, so that's I would assume Old Comiskey Park.
Yeah.
He did split time between third base and left field, so he was a multi-position guy before it became real popular. Sox fans loved him for his speed and his hustle. That I know. My dad was a big Minnie Minoso fan.
Yeah.
Huge Minnie Minoso fan.
That was a White Sox fan?
Oh, huge diehard White Sox fan. He was
a hard Sox fan. Okay.
Yeah, he hop on trains and take a trip to Sox Park, and back then you could climb under the fence and that kind of stuff.
Nice.
But the guy had a lot of speed, stolen bases, crowded the plate a lot, so he got hit by a lot of pitches. Led the league 10 times in getting hit by pitches. Again, that's something. That's getting on base. That's doing what you need to do to get on base to help your team score runs.
Absurd.
That can't be lost. Came back 50 years old, obviously 1976. Bill Veck, the master, Carney, brought him back at age 50, and then another 2 games in 1980 when he was 54, so he could play. What they gave him like six decades, I believe.
Five. He wrote it down.
40. Oh, there it is. Yeah. Hello.
Yeah.
And then he coached the White Sox, and he played in 5 different decades. So that's a lot of good stuff. But look at his numbers too. This is a guy whose numbers back it up.
Yeah, I mean, he's in that threshold according to the WAR figures, and as well. I mean, there's a little bit more red than the other players we just mentioned. So let's talk about it really quick as we're getting to that point. I mean, 205 stolen bases is a healthy amount of stolen bases. Uh, the advanced stats say that they weren't very efficient stolen bases, but if you're a counting stats fan, I mean, 205 stolen bases. I mean, he's in the red. I mean, the red is good, and he's blue is bad, red is good. Really good plate approach at 1.39 walk per strikeout ratio. As you may or may not know, I'm a big fan of walk per strikeout ratio. The triple slash line is as healthy as can be. This is probably the highest we've seen so far on this list. 848 ops, 382 woba, 133 WRC plus. Or those wondering what a 133 WRC plus is, that means he was 33% better than his league peers during the 40-year stretch here that we have going. And then the big magical number 50.8, as you can see, it's not neither blue nor red, it's somewhere in between. So it's in that threshold. He's come close before, he's been considered before. Jerry Reinsdorf is he still pulls strings every once in a while in Major League Baseball. So maybe this is the year that they get him in. I just know that when he died very tragically, I think he died almost at the same time that Ernie Banks died. And I was floored to find out that he was not in the Hall of Fame yet, and it was pretty sad. And Austin wrote down that the crowd loved him for his speed and hustle, and he was a beloved player till the day that he died. Before I move on, anything else you got to add about Minnie Minoso?
Yeah, just looking a little bit deeper. I mean, again, the guy was 13 times. He was an All-Star 13 times.
Oh, geez.
Got 3 Gold Gloves again. When we talk about MVP, he was in the top 10 4 different times. Again, big deal. And one of those years he was second in Rookie of the Year. So, I mean, I had some good seasons. Bill James, who was kind of the start of all this, the advanced stats, advanced metrics sort of thing, he ranks Minnie Minoso as the 10th best left fielder of all time, ahead of 12 current Hall of Famers. Billy Williams, Lou Brock, Frank Clark, Joe Medwick. So, I mean, Bill James is a respected, I don't know if I want to call him an authority, but he's a respected voice, I think, in the game when it comes to the statistical analysis side of things. And he's got him as the 10th best left fielder of all time. Not just a period, but I mean, think about every left fielder's ever played. He's the 10th best of all time.
That's saying a lot.
That's saying a lot. And again, somebody like that saying that, then when you look at some of these other stats, he was an all-star often, 1 Gold Glove. He was in the running for MVP 4 different times, almost got Rookie of the Year. That guy's in.
Yeah. So I want to say a quick hello to Austin, who appreciates us reading his stories. Now we appreciate you, Austin, for giving us your stories and giving us something to chew on besides the numbers here. Corey Richmond, good friend of mine, also appearing on the podcast as a spectator. Thank you guys for joining us this evening. We're reaching that point, Dan. Going to try to see if we could speed things up a little bit. Ken Boyer, and the only Cardinal not to be in the Hall of Fame, but have his number retired by his team. You talked about it, the statue guys, right, for the Cubs. I guess this would be the jersey guys for the Cardinals. When I was looking up Ken Boyer and the way people were describing him, I got a lot of Scott Rowland vibes. And then I saw the numbers and I thought to myself, maybe not necessarily Scott Rowland, but yeah, solid third baseman. I found out through Austin's notes that he is the brother of Cleet Boyer. I did not know that they were brothers. Cleet was a very prominent figure as well in that Yankees book called Dynasty by Peter Goldenbach. So Ali Reynolds, Roger Maris, Cleet Boyer, they were all in that book. He was the last Cardinal to hold the captaincy of the team. I guess isn't Yadier Molina a captain, or is he just a captain by name only and not really official? I don't know. People keep telling me how good he is as a leader. What do you think about Yadier Molina as a Cub fan over there?
Probably one of the best ever.
Yeah, right.
Probably one of the best ever. And any Cub fan who says they wouldn't want him on our team.
Oh, Cub fans would adore him if you were on the.
He's like Dennis Rodman. You hate him on the other team, but you love him when he's on your team.
And Yadier Molina, as you know, he's bad when he wants to be, right?
Yeah.
Let's see. Boyer debuted in 1955. He got better and then got the MVP in 64. And the Cardinals, I think they won the World Series that year. And then he started declining, as he writes down. Retired with the 3rd highest slugging percentage among third basemen. That has to count for something, right? I mean, he's only behind Eddie Matthews and Ron Santo. Yeah, and of course we all know that Eddie Matthews was a slam dunk selection, but Ron Santo took forever, and now Ken Boyer is also being taken for a ride here. So it's just, if you want to be in the Hall of Fame, do not play third base is the lesson you guys have to learn here.
Yeah.
The disrespect, 5 Gold Gloves, spent some time coaching in the minors, and died of lung cancer in 82. So yeah, oh my God, these guys are just right. Well, who was that guy who died in 85? Maris, also former Cardinal, right?
Yep.
And then this guy right here too, Ken Boyer, died in 82. Jesus, man. He was originally drafted as a pitcher, but was switched to third base. Didn't the Cubs have a guy in Jim Bollinger who was a third baseman and got switched to being a pitcher?
Shortstop, I believe.
Ah, that makes more sense.
Might have been a shortstop.
Thank you for that. See, I can count on you to correct me on those. Army veteran. I'm pretty sure Austin appreciates that. As you may or may not know, Austin dad was a military personnel, and Ken Boyer, an Army veteran from 51, 53. So that was probably the Korean War. So we talk a lot about Ted Williams and his myth about going to Korea and shooting down airplanes and stuff. Well, Ken Boyer's no slouch either. He also went to Korea. And you know what? I mean, Dan, would you go and say that him going to battle probably affected his Hall of Fame resume a little bit here?
Yeah. I mean, you're away from the game for that long, and yeah, I mean, it has to. It absolutely has to, because you miss a lot of games.
Oh man, that sucks. That really sucks. I mean, we gotta be.
Does.
I got a question for you. Al Downing, is that the guy who gave up the home run to Henry Aaron?
Yep.
Okay, well, Ken Boyer got a grand slam in the 64 World Series off Yankees pitcher Al Downing. So big instrument. Let's see the numbers here. So 2,100 hits. That's in the red. 282 home runs. They just talked about the slugging percentage being up there, so that has to count for something. RBI is in a little shade of red, so that's good. 105 stolen bases for a third baseman. I mean, Jesus, 287 average. I mean, but as you can see, some of these numbers start petering out, and the 54.8 WAR. It's healthy, but is it healthy enough in your view?
No.
Okay, just like that, flat out no.
Well, no, I think this is another guy who is, of course, similar to Sano.
Yeah,
so that could be, very, very similar to Sano. So I suppose, and I think that's what the Hall of Fame has kind of gotten. All of us, I think, to talk about it, kind of get into that trap of, well, this guy made it, so my guy needs to make it because he's the same. And again, that's great. That's good, healthy debate. That's what makes baseball great. But as we start doing that, that line keeps getting pushed out a little bit further and a little bit further, because you could say, well, Sano made it. Boyer's not quite as good, but he's pretty close. Yeah, let's put him in. And then, we keep backing that boundary up, or pushing it out further, I should say. So, I mean, as a comparison to Santo, yeah, he's pretty close to Santo. So based on that alone, I would say yes. But when you look at his numbers overall, he's in the Hall of really good.
Well, the one thing that is a disadvantage here is that, I mean, Ken Boyer, I mean, you talk about 64, that's a pitching heavy era right there. So yeah, he does suffer because of that. But when you compare it to the rest of his peers over that 40-year span, it's a tough sell as well. But there's a lot to like here with Ken Boyer. So let's move on. I think this is the last guy on the list, Dick Allen. For many, 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 many years, was probably one of the most criminally underrated baseball players of all time. Just a shame that he was not in the Hall of Fame. And if you want to do me a favor, go ahead and read Austin's notes if you have it up there.
Yeah, absolutely. Dick so Allen. He was known for swinging a heavy bat. He had a 44-ounce bat. McGuire swung a 35-ounce bat, and Barry Bonds swung a 32-ounce bat. Different era. Different other things. He came in with the Phillies, where he encountered a lot of racism and mistreatment off the field. I'll tell you a real quick side note. I don't know if you've read, there's a book out there, 10 Innings at Wrigley. It was a 23-22 game.
The crazy Mike Schmidt game where he.
It's a great book because it's every other chapter is about the game, and then the next chapter talks about a player. And there was a chapter in there about Dick Allen, and so talking about this next where we talked about encountering a lot of racism and mistreatment off the field. That's a guy. We often use the word misunderstood. Mm-hmm. I think that's the guy he was, because he wasn't a real loud guy.
Yeah.
He was the guy who showed up and wanted to play. As Austin says right there, he had a lot of criticism because he did strike out. He did have some errors at third base. He eventually moved to first. But he had 341 and slug 618 the rest of that season in 1964. So he finished strong, which is always excellent. OPS plus, he had a 166 the following 3 years. Again, he was right there with Willie Mays, who's actually better than Mays, better than Clemente, better than Aaron, better than Cepeda. Can't get much better than that span of time. I mean, you're talking about 4 of the greats. 65 season, that's kind of what a lot of folks know about, which is odd that they would know that about Dick Allen, but there was a little kerfuffle in the dugout and he gets hit with a bat. But because not a lot of folks talked about it, he got threatened with that fine if he talked about it. So, of course, the media blamed him. Again, I think we probably all know why.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because Frank Thomas, even though they didn't talk about it, he did not want the manager to release him for that incident because he knew he was not involved in it at all. But that's when things, as Austin states here, kind of went downhill after that. His bat kind of struggled after that. One of the first guys to wear batting helmet out in the field to protect, but he did it because things were being thrown at him. I mean, that's I can't even imagine that. And this wasn't the 1940s. This was the 60s and the 70s. And I get it was a pretty volatile time, but still, that much.
And by the way, when you say Frank Thomas, it's not the big hurt Frank Thomas.
It's not the big hurt, and it's not the other big Frank Thomas. This was just a little, infielder guy.
Oh, jeez.
But and then he had some alcohol problems after that because of all the scrutiny he was under. Wrote messages in the dirt to himself, which I found very interesting. He was traded to St. Louis at the end of the 60s. Then he got traded to the Dodgers. So at this point, obviously, his production was waning a little bit and probably was thought of as probably not worth the trouble that he was perceived to bring, which he didn't bring. Then he went to the White Sox and got MVP in 72. And now this is, remember when I watched Dick Allen play in the 70s, because my dad obviously went to a lot of Sox games, watched them on TV on Channel 44 all the time. But he was only there for a couple of years, got traded over to Atlanta. This is a really interesting part of Dick Allen. He decided to retire instead of going to Atlanta because he enjoyed Chicago so much he did not want to go to Atlanta.
I don't blame him.
So he retired. So they did have him come out of retirement, but he didn't produce as much, obviously. The fans turned on him again. But they turned around and treated him well a second time around. And he enjoyed his second stint over there. Sox, with Philadelphia rather. So not sure what happened that would have made him turn, but they turned apparently and thought of it as a favorite. And I think I read something recently where they've kind of opened their arms back up to him. And I think did they retire his number? They had some sort of, I know they had some sort of event for him on the field before a game, if I recall. And in 76, they made the playoffs, and they were planning on leaving Tony Taylor off the playoff list. Allen said he wouldn't have played in playoffs unless Tony Taylor played. They were obviously tight. And after they won the first round, they had 2 celebrations, one for the majority of the team and one for Allen, who liked to keep to himself. Yeah. So I think that's why he was kind of misunderstood. He wasn't this brash guy. He wasn't a mouthy guy. He didn't talk a lot. He was just there to literally play baseball. I truly believe this guy was one of the most misunderstood guys to ever play baseball.
Yeah.
This didn't happen. I think, again, we've been talking about, I think this guy should have been a no-brainer several years ago.
Right. And we're going to get to that really quick as that's the final guy. But really quick, I just want to point out on this list of 100 position players, according to WAR, Gil Hodges was ranked number 67th overall. Tony Oliva was 73rd overall. Minnie Minoso was 45th overall. Ken Boyer was 38th overall. And the only guy who would have shown up on the first page of that Fangraphs leaderboard is Dick Allen, who was at sorry, I've got distracted here. 28th overall. So the counting stats are not there. Only 1,800 hits, a little bit over 1,800 hits, but the power is why you got Dick Allen to be on your team. 351 home runs, over 1,000 RBI, 133 stolen bases from a guy from a power hitter.
Right.
That's pretty darn good. I mean, he's on the red. So that should tell you what you need, and a very efficient at that with a weighted stolen base of 9.3. So the advanced stats love his running. 290, I mean the triple slash line, 292, 378 on base, 534 slugging, 912 ops, 400 WOBA. Weighted on base average, 400. And just to give people an idea what a 400 WOBA in this era means, he is only behind guys like Mike Schmidt, his teammate, as you mentioned, Hank Aaron, Duke Snyder, Frank Robinson, Jackie Robinson, and Willie Mays. Those are the guys ahead of him.
Well, look at the guys below him. Jim Rice, Eddie Matthews, Harmon Kilmer, Willie McCovey, Willie Stargell.
They're all Hall of Famers.
Reggie, he's way above Reggie. Norm Cash. I mean, these are all Hall of Famers.
Holy crap. Dick Allen's WRC plus, he was 55% better than league average. That's fourth.
Wow.
Fourth overall.
Look at the three guys right behind him. Three guys right behind him. You could easily make those your three best players of all time.
Willie Mays, Frank Robinson, Hank Aaron, Mike Smith, and then ahead of him are Stan Musial, Mickey Mantle, Ted Williams. I mean, it's absurd. But obviously he played first base, as we've been saying. First basemen do get penalized a little bit here from a defensive standpoint, so that dropped them all the way to 28th overall. But I mean, it's pretty simple to say which way we're leaning to. But we got one more guy to talk about, and that is Danny Murtaugh, and he was. I make this bigger. What is this? I forgot what this was. Let's start from the beginning. Wins. So let's just sort this by wins, just to make my life easier. And Murtaugh, he's okay. So the spreadsheet I'm showing is the all-time 1,000 plus winning manager. So only these are the guys, according to Baseball Reference, who have won more than 1,000 games in baseball. And Murtaugh is on the list, 55th overall, but he's on the lower side, on the lower end on this list with a 1,115 wins, 540 win-loss percentage though, and that's gonna put him in favor with some people who are looking for that type of stuff. But as you know, or as you may or may not know, Dan, it is very hard for a manager to make it to the Hall of Fame.
Yes.
As Tom Kelly has 2 World Series championships. He's not in the Hall of Fame. Danny Murtaugh has 2 World Series championships. Probably not getting inducted either. But let me look at notes from Austin. Has the second most victories in Pirates history. I wonder who number 1 is. Is it Jim Leland? No way. No, it's Clint Hurdle. Within 1 year of managing the team, Murtaugh brought the Pirates from a 7th place team that won 33 games out of first place to 2nd place team. First World Series championship came 3 years after taking over the team, so that's impressive. Under Murtaugh, the Pirates amassed 90 wins in 5 different seasons, known for making players feel important and respected. Roberto Clemente, which made them play better and want to play well for him. And I mean, you talk about Dick Allen being kind of misunderstood and being surly. Roberto Clemente is the ultimate misunderstood player as well, and Murtaugh made him feel at home. If we are to believe Austin's research here, so he has 2 championships. But the average rank was 3.3, I guess, 3rd place, 4th place in those 15 years that he managed. That puts him somewhere in the middle of the pack of these managers. So I don't know if that's impressive enough for you. But final thoughts on Danny Murtaugh before we move on and review our picks.
I don't think there's anything about his. He won a couple of titles, but I mean, in 61 with the Pirates, that was a really good team. And then again in 71, an equally really good team. Not saying that they would win with anybody else. But he did. You take away those 2, which you can't. I mean, he's got them. He'll always have those. But if you take those away, he really. I remember I watched him at the end of his career. There was nothing really that stood out to me about him. He was just. I always looked at him as a guy who was in that Earl Weaver mold, just an old, crabby, old school baseball guy playing for the 3-run homer. Always argued with the umps. Just always. It looked like a guy who's been playing baseball or involved in baseball for 50 years, 60, 70 years is how I always looked at him. So I don't think there's much there myself.
All right, let's move on then. Let's start with, we got 4 ballots here. It's me, you, Austin, and Melvin. Let's start with Melvin's picks. For the early baseball era, Melvin picked Bill Dolan, Lefty O'Doul, George Tubby Scales, and Vic Harris. And for the Golden Days era, he picked Billy Pierce, Dick Allen, Gil Hodges, and Minnie Minoso. So any qualms with Melvin's ballot there?
No, I'm still surprised we didn't see Buck O'Neill there, but
Mm-hmm.
people have different things they look for.
Yeah, he probably saw that he didn't have enough numbers. Yeah, I mean, he went with lefty Odula or Buck O'Neill here, but he also picked Tubby Skills and Vic Harris. So interesting to get his thoughts on that. Austin's ballot. Bill Dolan, Buck O'Neill from the early baseball era, along with George Tubby Scales and John Donaldson. And for the Golden Days era, he went with Jim Kite, Dick Allen, who he puts on the comments here. He's actually listening in. He puts in the comments saying that is one of the guys I fell in love with when I was researching his story. Gil Hodges and Roger Maris. So Austin also said that he fell in love with Ken Boyer's story, but not enough to put him as one of the one of his guys that he would induct to the Hall of Fame here. Roger Maris is the other guy that he lists. So this is I can almost rest assured that this is a lot different than our ballots, right, Dan?
Yep.
Tell the folks who you went with.
Well, so for the early era, I took Bill Dolan, Buck O'Neill, Bud Fowler. I took Bud Fowler because of being the first African American player in organized baseball. And then Vic Harris, chose him simply because of the managing record.
Yeah.
I told Felipe that was my 4B is John Donaldson, but we don't have 4B, so it's just those four. And then for the Golden Era, I took Tony Oliva, Dick Allen, of course, Ken Boyer. The reason I selected him was the reason I gave. We were talking is, well, Ron Sano's in. His career's pretty close to Ron Sano.
Yeah,
that's why I put him in there. And then Minnie Minoso, I think the numbers are there for Minnie Minoso. I think the record's clear for him.
And then for me, I went with Bill Dolan. I mean, you heard me get excited when I saw Bill Dolan's name. This is a guy I feel an affinity because he was in a previous mentioned in a podcast episode with Robert Holliday. Buck O'Neill, I mean, for all the reasons we talked about, ambassador, push for that Negro League Museum to be open. He already has an award in the Hall of Fame. Might as well put him in the Hall of Fame officially. Right. Reynolds, I mean, you saw me gleam when I talked about him being part of that dynasty book from Peter Golenbach. So it just brought back a lot of memories. So I said, you know what? If I have a vote, I would definitely vote for Allie Reynolds and get a Native American in the Hall of Fame as well. Bud Fowler, for the same reasons you mentioned, he was the first. And I thought it'd be cool to elect someone from Cooperstown into the Cooperstown National League Baseball Hall of Fame, I guess. And then my Golden Days era. Did you mention your Golden Days era too, or?
I did, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Oh, yeah, you did. Ken Boyer. Okay, so my Golden Days era picks, Jim Kite, just because the durability aspect of him. He pitched forever. Got to give him some credit for that. So he's in there. Dick Allen, for all the reasons we just mentioned, probably the one position player that deserved to be in this Hall of Fame. If you are to elect anybody, it'd be him. Ken Boyer, just because I liked what I saw from the numbers that I saw, and he kind of reminded me of Scott Rowland, who I also think is a Hall of Fame player. Although after digging into his numbers, he's not like Scott Rowland, but now that's ingrained in my head. And he was a big important piece of that Cardinals 1960s teams as well. So I mean that has to count for something. And Minnie Minoso, because number one, I'm a White Sox fan and I believe that he does deserve it. But number two, it's one of those things where the numbers are kind of there, but also the contribution to the game is there as well, as one of the first prominent Latin American, not Latin American, but just Latino players of Cuban descent, especially where he had to defect. We're talking about post Fidel Castro Cuba here. And he made a name for himself in Major League Baseball, despite probably getting a late start in his life in terms of playing in the big leagues. And there's our picks.
And interesting, there's only one unanimous person out of all 8 of those, and it's Dick Allen.
Dick Allen, yeah. So, Bill Dolan too.
Oh, Bill Dolan too. You're right. And I thought Buck O'Neill would be the second one, but that's okay. He still got enough. 3 out of 4.
So with that being said, Bill Dolan, Buck O'Neill, Dick Allen, and Minnie Minoso. As you know, Dan Butler, we have a Baseball Life Hall of Fame as well.
We do.
And since we are the self-appointed committees to both of these ballots, those gentlemen that I just named are going into the Baseball Life Hall of Fame, and I'm going to put your guys' name on it as being part of that committee to elect those guys into the Baseball Life Hall of Fame. So even if the National Baseball Hall of Fame doesn't get this right, we did it right.
We did.
Sure, it's a small sample size.
Just a reminder for anybody who's listening, watching, whatever the case might be. Don't forget, there's a posted or there's a post in Baseball Life with the link to vote for the current Hall of Famers. There's 20 guys on the list. You can vote up to 10. We had 45 responses last year. We've got over 8,000 people in the group. I'm not a math major, but that's not very good. It's a very, very, very low turnout. So look at the group. I believe it's up at the top. I believe Vince pinned it up there at the top, or you might have pinned it.
I did, but it doesn't matter. When I told us that, hey, as admins, we need to participate in this. And
so I think go in there. We have a lot of discussion all the time about who should and who shouldn't. Here's your opportunity to tell people who you think. And I'm not sure, we haven't quite decided how long the voting is going to go.
I'll be out there for a while.
It'll be for a couple, 2-3 more weeks at least. We got to get more than 45 with 8,000 members in the group.
Yeah,
there's no reason we shouldn't have well over 500 or 1,000 votes. I mean, and it's all calculated automatically. I haven't checked in a couple days, so I really don't have much of an update right now. I probably won't give updates as far as singular players, because you don't want to have someone say, well, I was going to vote for that guy, but he's only got 10%. I'm not voting for him. So it'll be more generic, like, oh, there's 3 guys right now who have qualified based on a percentage of votes, but probably won't name names.
Well, number one, I have to look for my Gmail password, because you need to have your email password or Gmail account all in a row, and I have to look for it. I know I have it somewhere. I know where it is. I just have to get it. And I still have to do the research on these guys. So, but you're best assured I'm going to vote, and I'm going to take it full advantage, and I'm going to vote for all 10 of the guys that I'm allotted to. So I'm not one of those guys I'm only voting for one guy and one guy only. No, I'm voting for all 10 guys. But yeah, the Bill Dolan, Buck O'Neill, Dick Allen, Minnie Minoso, they will be in our Baseball Life Hall of Fame. I will put Austin, Dan, and Melvin as part of the committee there. So as long as the admins don't take that pinned post down, you guys are now living. That is your contribution, your permanent contribution to this Facebook group. So I thank you for that. And speaking of thank you, Dan, for showing up tonight. Greatly appreciated. Showing up, and I would ask you where they could find you, but I mean, they know where they find you. They just go to the Facebook, the Baseball Life Facebook group, and
I'm there.
Then talk about Purdue basketball and football with you.
Don't get me started on basketball. We got hosed over, but that's okay.
All right. Well, hey, if you guys want to talk basketball, there is the Basketball Life group as well. We'll talk some hoops there: college hoops, NBA hoops, European hoops, women's hoops, hula hoops, whatever, loop-de-loops. It is Christmas time. All right, that's enough out of me. My name is Felipe. That's Dan over there, Purdue alum. You were listening to the Total Basis podcast. We will be here hopefully next either Sunday or Monday. I haven't decided. Let's see if Austin has his ducks in a row. Dan, I can't thank you enough once again for coming on the show. Greatly appreciate it, man. And I bid everybody a good night. We'll see you next time. Have a good one, everybody.